The unexpected catch. The jungle was alive with its usual symphony of sounds, the buzz of insects, the distant calls of unseen creatures, and the faint rustle of leaves disturbed by the occasional gust of humid wind. Dax Torin crouched in the shadows of the dense foliage, his sharp eyes fixed on the handwoven net trap he had set the night before. It had been nearly 5 years since he crash-landed on this planet, an uncharted and unforgiving alien wilderness. In that time, he had transformed from a disoriented pilot into a survivalist whose every movement was dictated by the rhythms of the jungle. The planet had no name, at least not one that Dax knew. He called it, the Green, a nod to the overwhelming, relentless canopy that towered above him. His traps were his lifeline, ensuring he didn't have to engage with the jungle's larger and more dangerous inhabitants. Usually, he caught enough small creatures to sustain himself. But this morning, something was different. A sharp snap echoed through the trees, the unmistakable sound of his trap being triggered. His stomach growled in anticipation. He tightened his grip on the knife holstered at his side and rose silently, his well-trained muscles moving with the precision of a predator. As Dax approached the clearing where the trap was set, he noticed something off. The usual thrashing and squealing of the local fauna was absent. Instead, a low, rhythmic hum filled the air, tinged with a strange metallic resonance. His brow furrowed as he crept closer, his instincts screaming caution. When he pushed aside the thick underbrush, what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Suspended in the air by his net was not an animal but a figure. A humanoid figure. The rope strained to hold its weight, swaying slightly as the being struggled against the bindings. Its skin shimmered in the dappled sunlight, a violet hue that shifted and glowed faintly. Its hair, long and flowing like a cascade of molten silver, caught the light in a way that seemed almost ethereal. Then it spoke. "Please," it said, its voice trembling yet melodic. "Do not harm me. I mean no threat." Dax's knife hovered mid-air as he stared, dumbfounded. The creature's glowing jade eyes locked onto his, pleading. "What the hell are you?" he muttered, his voice gruff from years of disuse. His grip on the knife tightened, unsure whether to cut the ropes or defend himself. "I am no threat," it repeated, more urgently now. "Free me, and I will explain." Dax hesitated, his survival instincts warring with his curiosity. Finally, he sheathed his knife and stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the alien as he began cutting the netting. The ropes fell away, and the creature landed gracefully, its movements fluid and precise despite the fall. It stood before him, taller than any human he had ever met. The markings on its skin pulsed faintly, almost like a living circuit board. Its expression was wary but not hostile. "I am Kayla," the creature said, bowing its head slightly. "And I am in your debt, human." "How do you know what I am?" Dax asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. His hand hovered near his holster, ready to draw his weapon if this was some kind of trap. Kayla tilted her head, a gesture that seemed almost human. "Your kind is known to my people. Though we have not met in peace before." Dax narrowed his eyes. "Before?" Kayla's glowing eyes flickered with a mix of emotions, hesitation, perhaps even shame. "This is not the place to discuss such matters. But know this, I did not come here by choice." "Neither did I," Dax said, his tone cold. "Now start talking, or you're on your own." Kayla glanced around the dense jungle, her gaze lingering on the shadows between the trees. "There are things here far more dangerous than I," she said softly. "And they are hunting me. The jungle's secrets." Dax led Kayla back to his shelter, a small but sturdy structure built into the side of a rocky hill. It was well hidden, camouflaged with the greenery of the jungle, and fortified against the planet's predators. As they approached, Dax glanced over his shoulder, noting how Kayla moved with an unnatural grace, her violet skin shimmering faintly even in the shade. Inside the shelter, Kayla took in her surroundings with quiet curiosity. The space was utilitarian, with a makeshift bed, a table carved from a fallen tree, and shelves lined with scavenged supplies. The centerpiece was a small fire pit, its warmth filling the room with a faint smoky aroma. "Sit," Dax said, gesturing to the stool by the table. Kayla complied, her movements fluid and unhurried. Dax busied himself with preparing a meal, his mind racing with questions. "You said you were being hunted," he began, breaking the silence. "By what?" Kayla hesitated, her glowing eyes fixed on the fire. "My people," she said finally. "Or what's left of them." Dax froze, his hand hovering over a piece of fruit. "Your own people are after you. They believe I am a threat to our survival," Kayla said, her voice heavy with something that sounded like regret. "But they do not understand the full truth." "Then explain it," Dax said, his patience wearing thin. "Because right now, it sounds like you're dragging me into a mess I don't want any part of." Kayla met his gaze, her expression earnest. "I carry something they fear, knowledge of the Nexus core. It is an artifact of immense power, left behind by an ancient race. My people have used it for centuries to sustain our existence, but its power is finite. And it is failing." Dax frowned, leaning back against the wall. "So, what? They think you're trying to take it for yourself?" Kayla nodded. "They believe I wish to use it to ascend, to become something greater. But that is not my intention. The core is unstable, and if it collapses, it will destroy not just my people, but this entire region of space." Dax rubbed a hand over his face, trying to process what he was hearing. "And what does that have to do with me?" Kayla hesitated, her glowing eyes studying him. "Your kind is unique. Your bioelectric field resonates with the core in a way no other species does. It is why I sought this planet. It is why I sought you." Dax's stomach turned. "You came here looking for a human?" "For me." "Not specifically you," Kayla admitted, her voice soft. "But now that I've found you, I believe you can help me stabilize the core. If we do not act, its collapse is inevitable." Dax stared at her, his mind reeling. He had spent 5 years on this planet, struggling just to survive. Now, this alien was asking him to help save the galaxy. "Let me get this straight," he said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "You want me to waltz into your people's backyard, poke around with some ancient superweapon, and hope we don't all blow up?" Kayla's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of desperation in her eyes. "I know it is much to ask. But I cannot do this alone." Dax sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "I'm not a hero, Kayla. I'm just a guy trying to make it to the next day without getting eaten." Kayla stood, her tall frame casting a shadow over him. "You may not see it, but you have already proven yourself to be more than that. You survived this jungle for years, alone. You freed me when you could have left me to die. That is not the mark of an ordinary man." Dax stared at her, the weight of her words settling over him. He didn't want to get involved, but deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore the situation. If Kayla was telling the truth, the stakes were too high. "Fine," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "But if this goes sideways, I'm blaming you." Kayla's lips curved into a faint smile. "Fair enough, human." Into the unknown. The jungle seemed darker than usual as Dax and Kayla ventured deeper into its heart. Dax had traveled these paths countless times, but with Kayla beside him, everything felt foreign. The air seemed heavier, charged with a strange energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. Kayla moved silently, her violet skin glowing faintly in the dim light filtering through the canopy. Dax couldn't help but notice how her presence altered the jungle around them. Plants shifted subtly as they passed, their leaves unfurling as if drawn to her. It was unsettling, yet mesmerizing. "How far is this Nexus core?" Dax asked, breaking the silence. "It is hidden deep within a cavern system beneath this jungle," Kayla replied, her voice soft but steady. The energy storms in this region make it nearly impossible for my people to pinpoint its exact location. But I can feel it, calling to me. Calling to you? Dax raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound ominous at all. Kayla glanced at him, a hint of amusement in her glowing eyes. The core is not alive, but it is aware. It responds to the resonance of those who approach it. That is why your presence is so vital. Without you, its energy will remain unstable. Dax grunted, shifting his grip on his plasma rifle. He wasn't convinced that he was the savior Kayla claimed him to be, but he couldn't turn back now. The thought of leaving her to face this alone didn't sit right with him. The first obstacle. After hours of navigating dense undergrowth and treacherous terrain, they reached the mouth of a massive cave. The entrance was partially obscured by thick vines, and a faint blue glow emanated from within. Dax crouched, scanning the area with his rifle's infrared scope. Anything? Kayla asked, standing behind him. Just the usual suspects, Dax replied, motioning to the heat signatures of small creatures scurrying about. No big predators. Yet. Kayla stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the cave. We must move quickly. The core's instability will attract more than just the jungle's creatures. Dax followed her inside, his instincts on high alert. The cave was unlike anything he'd seen before. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, glowing faintly with the same shifting patterns that adorned Kayla's skin. What is this place? He asked, running his hand along the carvings. A precursor site, Kayla explained. My people believe these ruins were left behind by the architects of the Nexus core. They built the core as a beacon of balance, a way to stabilize energy across entire systems. But over time, the knowledge of its true purpose was lost. And now your people are using it as a glorified battery, Dax said, his tone sharp. Kayla flinched but didn't argue. Yes. And that misuse is why it is failing. That is why we must act. Their conversation was interrupted by a low growl that echoed through the cave. Dax spun, raising his rifle. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything he'd encountered, a hulking beast with crystalline scales that refracted light like prisms. Its eyes glowed the same eerie blue as the carvings on the walls. What the hell is that? Dax asked, backing up slowly. A guardian, Kayla whispered. The precursors created them to protect the core. The creature stepped closer, its movements deliberate and menacing. Dax aimed for its center mass and fired. The plasma bolt struck the creature, but instead of wounding it, the energy was absorbed into its crystalline body. The beast roared, the glow of its eyes intensifying. Well, that's not good, Dax muttered, retreating further. Kayla stepped forward, her hands raised. Wait. Let me try. The beast's gaze locked onto her, its growl subsiding slightly as she approached. Kayla closed her eyes, and the markings on her skin began to glow brighter. The creature tilted its head, its aggression waning. What are you doing? Dax hissed. Trust me, Kayla said, her voice calm. She reached out slowly, her hand hovering just above the creature's crystalline hide. The beast hesitated, then leaned into her touch. Its glow dimmed, and it let out a low, rumbling purr. Kayla turned to Dax, a small smile on her lips. It recognizes the resonance. It knows we mean no harm. Dax lowered his rifle, shaking his head in disbelief. You've got a way with monsters, I'll give you that. Deeper connections. As they moved deeper into the cave, the air grew colder, and the glow of the carvings intensified. The patterns on Kayla's skin seemed to synchronize with the walls, pulsing in perfect harmony. Dax couldn't shake the feeling that the cave was alive, watching them. He glanced at Kayla, who seemed completely at ease despite the oppressive atmosphere. You said the core responds to resonance, he said. What does that mean, exactly? Kayla hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Resonance is connection. It is not just energy but intention, emotion. The core was designed to stabilize not only physical systems but the harmony of those who interact with it. That is why your presence is so important. Humans have an unparalleled ability to connect, with each other, with the unknown. Dax snorted. You make it sound like we're some kind of cosmic miracle. Kayla stopped and turned to him, her glowing eyes serious. In a way, you are. Your kind is unpredictable, adaptable. You see possibility where others see impossibility. That is why the core reacts to you. Dax stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't feel special, he was just a guy trying to survive. But Kayla's belief in him was undeniable, and it stirred something deep within him. The Nexus Core. At last, they reached the heart of the cave. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood the Nexus Core, a massive, spherical structure suspended in midair by beams of shimmering light. Its surface was a swirling mass of energy, shifting between hues of blue, violet, and gold. Dax felt his breath catch in his throat. The core was beautiful and terrifying, its power palpable. Kayla approached it slowly, her movements reverent. This is it, she said softly. The heart of the Precursor's legacy. Dax followed, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. So, what do we do? Kayla turned to him, her expression serious. I will guide the core's energy, but it will need your resonance to stabilize. You must place your hands on it and focus. Focus on what? Dax asked, his nerves fraying. On connection, Kayla said. On everything that makes you human. Dax hesitated, then nodded. He stepped forward, his heart pounding as he reached out to the swirling energy of the core. The moment his hands touched its surface, a surge of power shot through him, and the world around him disappeared. The heart of the Nexus. The world around Dax dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and sound the moment his hands touched the Nexus Core. It wasn't painful, it was overwhelming. He felt as though he were suspended in a vast, endless void where time and space folded in on themselves. Pulses of energy surged through his body, each one a strange mix of warmth and power. Images flooded his mind, stars being born, galaxies spiraling into existence, and worlds teeming with life. Among the visions, he caught glimpses of the Precursors, towering beings of light and energy, their forms shifting like liquid. Their voices echoed in his head, speaking in a language he didn't understand but somehow felt he could almost grasp. The core wasn't just a machine. It was alive in a way Dax had never thought possible. It was ancient, wise, and infinitely powerful. The test begins. Dax, Kayla's voice called out, faint but steady, cutting through the storm of sensations. Focus. The core is reading you. Reading me? He shouted, his voice lost in the void. Yes, Kayla replied, her tone both reassuring and urgent. It is measuring your essence, your intentions. It will test you. Do not resist, guide it. Before Dax could respond, the light around him shifted. He was no longer in the void. He stood in the middle of a battlefield, familiar and horrifying. It was the site of the last mission he had led before crashing on this planet, where everything had gone wrong. Smoke billowed across the sky, and the screams of his fallen comrades rang in his ears. He saw himself, younger and more naive, barking orders that had sent his squad into an ambush. He felt the crushing weight of guilt all over again. This isn't real, he told himself, his fists clenched. It's just the core. But the pain felt real. The grief, the self-recrimination, they were as vivid as the day it had happened. Why did you fail them? A voice boomed, deep and resonant. It wasn't Kayla's voice. It was the core itself. Dax swallowed hard. I made a mistake. I didn't see the trap. His voice faltered, the weight of his guilt threatening to crush him. They trusted you, the core said. And they died. Dax's chest heaved as he fought to steady himself. Yes. They died. And I've carried that with me every day since. But I didn't give up. I learned. I survived. The battlefield around him faded, replaced by a new scene, his time on the jungle planet. He saw himself struggling to build his first shelter, fighting off predators, and scavenging for food. The core watched, its presence like a shadow over his thoughts. You endure, it said. But endurance alone is not enough. What drives you? Revealing the heart. The question echoed in Dax's mind, cutting deeper than he expected. What had driven him all these years? Survival? Revenge? No, it was something else. Hope, he said finally, his voice steady. Hope that I could find a way back. Hope that I could make things right. Hope that there's more to life than just surviving. The core pulsed, its light growing brighter. The scenes around him dissolved, and he found himself standing in a calm, open space. Kayla appeared beside him, her presence solid and reassuring. You're doing well, she said, her voice warm. The core is responding to you. Feels more like an interrogation, Dax muttered, though his tension eased slightly with her by his side. Kayla smiled faintly. The core does not give its power lightly. It must know you are worthy. The light around them shifted again, and Dax felt the core probing deeper into his mind. This time, it didn't show him his past. Instead, it revealed possibilities, futures that could be. One vision showed a galaxy united, species working together in harmony with the core at the center, stabilizing their worlds. Another showed chaos, planets torn apart by wars fought over the core's power, its energy corrupted by greed and fear. These are the outcomes you face, the core said. Your choices will decide which becomes reality. A shared burden. Kayla stepped forward, her glowing markings pulsing in rhythm with the core. The core seeks harmony, she explained, her voice calm but intense. It requires balance. That is why it responds to both of us. Alone, I cannot stabilize it. But together. She held out her hand to Dax, her violet skin shimmering in the core's light. We can show it what true connection means. Dax hesitated, his instincts screaming caution. But he remembered her words earlier, resonance is connection. And in that moment, he understood. It wasn't about power or control. It was about trust. He reached out, clasping her hand. The instant their skin touched, the core flared to life. Energy surged between them, linking their thoughts and emotions in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Kayla gasped, her eyes wide. Your mind, it's so different. Yours isn't exactly a walk in the park, Dax shot back, though his tone was laced with awe. He could feel her memories, her fears, and her hopes as if they were his own. She wasn't just fighting for her people, she was fighting to atone for the mistakes of her ancestors, who had misused the core for centuries. Through their connection, Kayla felt Dax's resilience, his stubborn refusal to give up even when the odds were against him. She saw the pain he carried, but also the strength it had forged within him. The core pulsed again, its voice filling the chamber. Connection achieved. Stabilization initiated. The price of balance. The energy around them intensified, and Dax felt a sharp pain in his chest. He staggered but didn't let go of Kayla's hand. The core's energy was rewriting them, reshaping their very essence to align with its purpose. Kayla cried out, her body trembling. It's too much. I can't. Yes, you can, Dax said through gritted teeth. We're in this together. He tightened his grip, pouring every ounce of his will into the connection. The core responded, its energy stabilizing as it fed off their shared determination. Finally, the light dimmed, and the pressure eased. Dax and Kayla collapsed to their knees, still holding onto each other. The core hovered above them, its energy calm and steady. "You have proven yourselves," it said. "The balance is restored." Dax looked at Kayla, her face pale but filled with relief. "We did it." She nodded, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Yes. We did. A new beginning." As they exited the cavern, the jungle seemed brighter, almost welcoming. The oppressive energy that had hung over the planet was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. Kayla turned to Dax, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Dax. You've given my people a chance to rebuild. To do better." Dax shrugged, though a small smile tugged at his lips. "Guess I couldn't let you do it alone." Kayla stepped closer, her expression softening. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met, human. Your strength, your heart, they are remarkable." Dax felt his cheeks heat under her gaze. "You're not so bad yourself." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their shared experience hanging between them. Then Kayla reached out, resting her hand on his shoulder. "This is not the end, Dax. The core has chosen us for something greater. Our journey is just beginning." Dax sighed, glancing back at the cave. "I was afraid you'd say that." Kayla smiled, her markings glowing faintly. "Come, human. The galaxy awaits." Together, they disappeared into the jungle, the dawn of a new adventure stretching out before them. The guardians of the Nexus. The dense jungle stretched endlessly before them, its vibrant hues alive with motion. Dax and Kayla moved side by side, their steps synchronized as though they had been working together for years. The Nexus core had changed them both, physically, emotionally, and, most importantly, spiritually. Dax could still feel the subtle hum of its energy coursing through him, a constant reminder that their connection to the core was far from severed. "Do you feel that?" Kayla asked, her voice low but urgent. Dax stopped, scanning their surroundings. The jungle seemed eerily quiet, the usual cacophony of alien wildlife muted. His hand instinctively rested on the grip of his plasma rifle. "Yeah, I feel it. Something's not right." Kayla knelt, pressing her glowing fingers to the ground. The markings on her skin pulsed faintly, mirroring the rhythmic vibrations of the earth beneath them. Her eyes widened. "We're not alone. My people, they've sent hunters." Dax tensed, gripping his weapon tightly. "Great. Just what we need." "How many?" "Too many," Kayla replied, rising to her feet. "They will stop at nothing to retrieve the core's power. They will see us as traitors." "Well, they're not taking it," Dax growled. "Not after everything we just went through." Kayla's glowing eyes met his, a flicker of determination sparking between them. "Then we fight." Ambushed. They didn't have to wait long. The first attack came silently, a flash of movement from the treetops. Dax fired instinctively, his plasma bolt scorching the trunk of a massive tree. Kayla spun, her hands glowing as she summoned energy from the core itself. A pulse of violet light erupted from her palms, striking their assailant and sending them crashing to the ground. The attacker, an Ithari warrior clad in sleek, shimmering armor, rose swiftly, undeterred by the blast. His weapon, a bladed staff crackling with energy, whirred menacingly as he advanced. Kayla moved to intercept him, her movements fluid and precise. Their blades clashed in a dazzling display of sparks and light. Dax, meanwhile, had his hands full with two more Ithari warriors who emerged from the shadows. They moved with inhuman speed, their glowing weapons arcing toward him. He ducked and rolled, firing a burst of plasma that forced them to scatter. "Kayla," he shouted. "A little help here." Kayla spun, deflecting a strike from her opponent before sending a wave of energy toward Dax's attackers. The blast knocked one of them off their feet, giving Dax the opening he needed to take down the other with a well-placed shot. The remaining Ithari hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering as they exchanged uncertain glances. Kayla stepped forward, her voice commanding. You do not understand what you're fighting for. The core is not your enemy, it is your salvation. One of the warriors sneered. You've betrayed your people, Kayla. The elders will not forgive this. Then they are blind, Kayla shot back, her voice firm. The core's power is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to unite us. The warrior hesitated, but before he could respond, a sharp whistle pierced the air. The remaining Ithari retreated into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Dax exhaled, lowering his rifle. Well, that was fun. Kayla's expression was grim. This was just a scouting party. The real force will come soon. A new plan. Back at their temporary shelter, a rocky outcrop shielded by dense foliage, Dax and Kayla regrouped. The jungle around them was quiet once more, but the tension lingered. They'll be back, Kayla said, pacing. And when they come, they'll bring everything they have. Dax leaned against a boulder, wiping sweat from his brow. So what's the plan? We can't take on an entire army. Kayla stopped, her glowing eyes narrowing in thought. The core chose us for a reason. It is not just a source of power, it is a guide. We need to use it. Use it how? Dax asked, his skepticism evident. We barely survived stabilizing the thing. Kayla stepped closer, her expression earnest. The core is linked to every precursor artifact in the galaxy. If we can tap into that network, we can activate defenses, systems the precursors left behind to protect their technology. Dax frowned. And you think these defenses will stop your people? Kayla hesitated. I don't know. But it's our only chance. Dax sighed, pushing himself off the boulder. All right. Let's do it. Where do we start? Kayla smiled faintly. Back at the core. The core awakens. Returning to the Nexus core wasn't easy. The jungle seemed more hostile than before, as if the planet itself sensed the conflict brewing. Dax and Kayla moved quickly, avoiding patrols and traps set by the Ithari hunters. When they finally reached the core's chamber, its energy was pulsing more intensely than before. The swirling patterns on its surface had grown more intricate, and the air around it crackled with power. Kayla approached it cautiously, her hands glowing as she extended her connection to the core. It recognizes us, she said softly. It knows why we've come. Dax watched as the core's light enveloped her, its energy merging with the markings on her skin. The chamber around them began to shift, the walls rippling as holographic projections appeared. They displayed maps of distant star systems, glowing pathways linking precursor sites across the galaxy. This is it, Kayla whispered, her voice filled with awe. The precursor network. Dax stepped closer, his eyes scanning the maps. Can we activate it? Kayla nodded, her hands moving in a series of precise motions. The projections shifted, focusing on a single site, a massive station orbiting a distant star. That is the heart of the network, Kayla explained. If we can reach it, we can access the full power of the precursor systems. Dax frowned. And let me guess, it's not going to be a walk in the park to get there. Kayla smiled faintly. No. But when has anything we've done been easy? The final push. As they prepared to leave the chamber, the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the cave. Dax and Kayla exchanged a tense glance. They're here, Dax said, raising his rifle. Kayla turned to the core, her glowing eyes fierce. Then we make our stand. The chamber erupted into chaos as the Ithari hunters stormed in. Dax and Kayla fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized. Plasma bolts and energy blasts lit up the cavern, the echoes of their battle reverberating through the walls. Despite their efforts, the Ithari pressed closer, their numbers overwhelming. Kayla gritted her teeth, channeling a massive surge of energy from the core. The blast knocked the hunters back, buying them a brief moment of respite. "We can't hold them off forever," Dax said, his voice strained. Kayla nodded, her gaze fierce. "Then we don't. We activate the core." She turned back to the Nexus, her hands glowing as she poured everything she had into its energy. The chamber trembled, and the light of the core grew blinding. "Dax," she shouted over the roar of the energy. "Hold them off for just a little longer." Dax nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. "You've got this, Kayla." As Kayla worked, the core's energy surged, and the holographic maps expanded to fill the chamber. One by one, the precursor systems across the galaxy began to activate, their dormant defenses springing to life. The Athari hunters faltered, their confidence shaken as the ground beneath them began to quake. Dax seized the opportunity, unleashing a volley of plasma fire that forced them into retreat. Kayla collapsed to her knees, her body trembling from the effort. The core pulsed steadily, its energy now stabilized and radiating outward. "It's done," she said weakly, looking up at Dax. He rushed to her side, helping her to her feet. "You did it, Kayla. We did it." The core's light enveloped them both, and for a moment, Dax felt a profound sense of peace. The precursor network was awake, its power spreading across the stars. To the stars. As the core's energy settled, the chamber grew calm. The Athari hunters had retreated, their forces scattered by the activation of the precursor systems. Kayla turned to Dax, her expression both exhausted and hopeful. "The galaxy is changing, Dax. We've started something that can't be undone." Dax nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned what humans are capable of." Kayla's glowing eyes met his, and for the first time, she allowed herself a moment of genuine warmth. "You are remarkable, Dax Torin. The core was right to choose you." Dax chuckled. "And you're not so bad yourself, Kayla." Together, they stepped out of the chamber, the jungle welcoming them with its vibrant light. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, their journey was far from over. A galaxy on the brink. The jungle seemed quieter as Dax and Kayla made their way back to the surface. The activation of the Nexus core had unleashed something profound, a wave of energy that rippled outward, touching every corner of the galaxy. Dax could feel its lingering hum beneath his skin, a constant reminder of the power they had just unleashed. Kayla, walking beside him, seemed lighter, as if the weight of centuries of desperation had been lifted from her shoulders. But her glowing eyes still carried a trace of worry. "What happens now?" Dax asked, breaking the silence. Kayla paused, glancing at the vibrant canopy above them. "The galaxy has changed. The core's activation has awakened precursor technology across countless worlds. Defenses, knowledge, and dangers." "Dangers?" Dax frowned. "What kind of dangers?" Kayla's expression darkened. "Not all who sense the core will see it as a force for balance. Many will try to control it, to weaponize its power. And there are those, like the Athari elders, who will stop at nothing to destroy it if they cannot claim it." Dax ran a hand through his hair. "Great. So we just painted a giant target on ourselves." Kayla nodded solemnly. "The core chose us as its guardians. It will guide us, but the path ahead will not be easy. A beacon in the stars." As they approached the rocky outcrop where their shelter lay hidden, a soft hum filled the air. Dax froze, his rifle instinctively raised. But Kayla placed a calming hand on his arm. "It's a signal," she said, her markings glowing faintly as she attuned to it. The hum coalesced into a holographic projection. A massive precursor station appeared, orbiting a distant, dying star. Its angular architecture shimmered with energy, the same swirling patterns that adorned Kayla's skin. "This is the heart of the network," Kayla explained, her voice filled with awe. the central hub where the precursors left their most advanced technology. The core's activation has awakened it. Dax narrowed his eyes at the hologram. And I'm guessing we're not the only ones who know about it. Kayla's gaze turned grim. No. Every species with access to the core's energy will feel its presence. It will draw allies, and enemies. So what's the play? Dax asked, his tone sharp. We get there first, lock it down. Kayla hesitated. It's not that simple. The station's defenses are ancient and powerful. Even with the core's guidance, it will test us before allowing entry. Dax sighed, shouldering his rifle. Figures. Alright, when do we leave? Kayla smiled faintly. As soon as we prepare. This is a journey we cannot afford to fail. The Ithari response. Their preparations were interrupted by a sharp, resonant hum that echoed through the jungle. Dax and Kayla exchanged a tense glance before stepping outside. The sky above them was darkening, ripples of energy spreading like waves across the horizon. They found us, Kayla said, her voice low. Dax cursed under his breath. Your people. Kayla nodded, her expression grim. The elders would not send a small force this time. They know what we've done. A faint rumble grew in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Soon, the silhouettes of Ithari warships became visible, their sleek, angular forms cutting through the clouds. The largest ship hovered above the jungle, its glowing hull bristling with energy weapons. Dax's hand hovered near his rifle. We can't take on a fleet, Kayla. Not here. We won't have to, she said, her markings glowing brighter. The core will protect us. As if on cue, the ground beneath them trembled, and a pulse of energy erupted from the cavern behind them. The Nexus core's power surged outward, creating a shimmering barrier that encased the jungle in a dome of light. The Ithari warships fired their weapons, but the energy dissipated harmlessly against the barrier. They'll find a way through, Dax said, his voice tense. We need to move. Kayla nodded. Agreed. The core's power will hold them off, but we must reach the precursor station before they do. A desperate escape. The journey to their hidden ship was fraught with danger. Ithari soldiers had landed in the jungle, their glowing armor blending seamlessly with the vibrant foliage. Dax and Kayla moved silently, relying on their bond with the core to guide them past patrols. As they approached the clearing where Dax's ship was hidden, a group of Ithari soldiers blocked their path. Dax raised his rifle, but Kayla stopped him. Wait, she said, stepping forward. Her glowing markings pulsed rhythmically, and the soldiers hesitated. What are you doing? Dax hissed. Showing them the truth, Kayla replied. She reached out, her energy extending toward the soldiers. Their glowing eyes flickered as they were momentarily overwhelmed by visions of the core, its purpose, and the balance it sought to bring. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons and stepped aside. Dax stared in disbelief. How did you? The core's resonance is undeniable, Kayla said, her voice tinged with sadness. But not all will see reason. Many will continue to fight. Into the stars. Dax's ship, an old but reliable scout vessel, roared to life as they powered up its engines. Kayla sat beside him in the cockpit, her gaze fixed on the swirling energy storm outside the barrier. The precursor station is in the Omega sector, she said, inputting coordinates into the ship's navigation system. It will take us days to reach it. If we can even get out of here, Dax muttered, gripping the controls. As the ship lifted off, the Ithari warships began to fire again, their weapons pounding against the barrier. The core's energy held strong, but cracks were beginning to form. We don't have much time, Kayla said urgently. Dax guided the ship toward the barrier, his hands steady on the controls. Hang on. The ship surged forward, breaking through the cracks in the barrier just as the Ithari fleet opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked past them, but Dax's years of piloting experience paid off. He weaved through the chaos with precision, narrowly avoiding the enemy fire. As they cleared the atmosphere, Kayla placed a hand on his arm. "We're not alone." Dax glanced at the sensors, which showed multiple ships approaching their position. His heart sank. "Reinforcements?" Kayla shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "No. Allies." The ships that appeared were an eclectic mix, vessels from various species, all marked with the same glowing patterns that adorned Kayla's skin. They had felt the core's activation and come to aid its new guardians. Dax let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Looks like the galaxy's starting to get the message." Kayla nodded, her gaze filled with hope. This is just the beginning. The journey ahead. As their ship joined the small fleet heading toward the precursor station, Dax allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He had spent years surviving alone, never imagining that he would one day be at the center of a galactic struggle for balance. Kayla leaned back in her seat, her glowing eyes meeting his. "You're thinking about the future." "Yeah," Dax admitted. "Feels like we're standing on the edge of something big." Kayla smiled faintly. "We are. But we're not alone anymore." For the first time in years, Dax felt a sense of purpose. Together, he and Kayla would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The galaxy had changed, and so had they. And as the stars stretched out before them, he knew one thing for certain: their story was far from over.